Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us here on KAKM for Saturday's show. On the warning and advisory map here, this area here is a flood watch for the Porcupine River. That's out through Monday. Then the red shaded areas here for the high and extreme fire danger due to the low humidities and breezy conditions have been going on there for the last several days. Those are out for this evening, then they come down after 10 p.m. or so when the humidity goes back up and the winds lighten up. Moving on to the breakup map here for May 16th, the Yukon now open. In fact, the Porcupine all the way back to the Canadian border open, and that's extending down through the Yukon. Then you get some chunks of ice here down in the lower valley there out to the delta, but Amonix still ice, and the Koyukuk open, and the Buckland is open, and the Kobuk here is got some areas of open water, actually mostly open upstream and some open down here, and even the North Slope River is starting to show some areas of open water on at least a couple of them up there. So moving on to the satellite imagery, a lot of sunshine here and clear skies again along the southeast coast. Still some low clouds, especially early on, even over the inside waters. That burned off this afternoon, so pretty nice conditions down there. And a lot of sunshine and warm temperatures here through the interior, temperatures into the 60s, 70s, and even the lower 80s over the eastern interior, with the clouds and rain back here to the west with that system coming northward. Brought a fair amount of rain to the Alaska Peninsula over the last 24 hours today, with Cold Bay and Chignik receiving about 0.8 of an inch. King Cove picked up 1.35 inches, and False Pass had over 2.5 inches of rain. By contrast, only 0.06 of an inch in that same 24-hour period falling at Unalaska. Otherwise, up to the north, Holy Cross, mainly with this system here, picked up about a 1/3 of an inch of rain, and up to 1/2 an inch of rain fell along the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, with Nome and White Mountain picking up just under 1/2 an inch, and then lighter amounts up here to the northwest. And that those rainfall amounts, of course, with this system here as it pulled northward, gives some pretty gusty winds today too, up to 30-35 miles an hour through the Kuskokwim Valley. And then wind coming up with this system again, gusting as high as 45 miles an hour at Cold Bay there ahead of that frontal system, and anywhere from 25 to 35 miles per hour along the southwest coast. On the chart today, here's all the low clouds up along the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, not quite as heavy as it was yesterday, and burning off from the inland areas from this morning, but a lot of clear skies here over the central interior, just some variable clouds over the central areas, with some isolated showers along the Alaska Range, and then up here from the Koyukuk Valley back to the west, a little more numerous as you get out toward that low center back out in this area. And then the system coming up from the south here, the frontal boundary pushing in with the gusty winds and rain spreading it back onto the southwest coast tonight. That'll move northward and a little to the east. Big area high pressure here over northwest Canada and eastern interior, as well as the Gulf of Alaska, directing all this moisture mostly up to the north with very little eastward movement. This is about as far east as it'll get there. Some rain back into Kodiak Island, across Bristol Bay, and then across the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley areas up into the northwest. So more rain in store for the Seward Peninsula, and even some light rain getting up into Kotzebue Sound and the Selawik Valley there, and possibly even as far north as the Noatak Valley. But the Arctic coast should be dry with partly cloudy skies there. Patchy fog at areas like around Barrow had that today, may see it again tonight, as well as other areas. Probably not too bad. Southwest winds, kind of a southwest wind there, keeping the eastern side pretty good. A lot of showers here with this trough out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then for tomorrow, that front edges its way, actually kind of oscillates back and forth a little bit, coming back to the west from where it pushes tonight. But that's going to keep Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula here, under the rain, as well as the southwest interior. Periods of rain tonight and tomorrow for the Seward Peninsula, and then getting a little more showery here over the northwest valleys with, again, the Arctic coast dry, light winds, and some patchy fog and low clouds, and that's about it. Another sunny, warm day here in the interior with temperatures into the 60s, 70s, and again, near 80 degrees here over the eastern border there in the 40-mile country, well into the 70s. And nice conditions. Could be a few isolated showers, still at risk of some shower activity there over the southern southeast coast, but the northern areas will be mostly clear and sunny. Still have that low clouds hugging the coastline there all the way around to the North Gulf Coast. Some of that could slip into Prince William Sound, but nothing too serious the way it looks at this point in time. Then the outlook for Monday, variable clouds here, still dry conditions and partly to mostly sunny skies for the Panhandle. Threat of showers should be over and pushed off into Canada, whatever does happen to get in there, if anything at all. But a couple more dry days coming up there with those northwest breezes out along the coastline, light variable winds inland, and lighter winds here over the interior, but still dry and still warm. No change really over the eastern interior, just some variable clouds, and that's about it. Maybe an isolated shower over the Kenai Peninsula. Scattered showers along the Alaska Range in the afternoon, a little bit to the north there. Then this weakening frontal boundary here gives an area of rain from the northwest valley south. We're kind of a narrow band here, cutting down across the lower and mid Yukon Kuskokwim River Valley areas down in toward Kodiak Island, but Bristol Bay, probably a better chance for king salmon for rain than there will be at Kodiak. Some showers back over the deltas as well as the Seward Peninsula, isolated showers. Dry, light winds here out over the Bering Sea, just some variable low clouds out in that area. And then the next system spreading some pretty good winds and rain into the central and western Aleutians, and that will be pushing eastward, spreading it into the eastern Aleutians probably on Monday evening and night, and eventually reaching the Alaska Peninsula. Temperatures around the southeast coast this afternoon range from 52 degrees at Elfin Cove to 64 down at Annette. Same thing at Juneau, 64 today with a 61 at Skagway, 54 in Yakutat, 57 up at Valdez with 52 at Cordova. The Copper River Basin in Gulkana had 65, 71 at Northway, 69 at Delta, and 68 at Fairbanks. Eagles a warm spot with 81 this afternoon. Otherwise, Fort Yukon had 70 degrees, Koyukuk had 58, or Bettles there had 58 degrees in the Koyukuk Valley, 48 at Anatuvik, and 37 up on the Arctic coast there at Deadhorse with 36 at Atusuk. Barrow with some low clouds and fog held at 30 degrees, 37 at Point Lay, up to 41 at Cape Lisburne, and 37 at Point Hope. 42 at Kivalina, about the same in Kotzebue. Buckland up to 47, and 35 there at Nome, 36 at Tin City, 34 at Gamble on St. Lawrence Island, and over the southwest interior, temperatures range from 62 at McGrath to 49 at Bethel. Mid to upper 40s here along the southwest coast, a little cooler there at Macoriac with 41. 43 at St. Paul with 46 at St. George. Lower 40s here out over the central and western Aleutians. Temperatures mostly in the mid to upper 40s along the Alaska Peninsula, ranging from 47 both at Unalaska and King Salmon to 50 degrees there at Port Hayden. And then for lows tonight, lower to mid 40s there for Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, near 40 out over the Aleutians, upper 30s there for the Bering Sea, lower 30s, northern Bering Sea, and also lower 30s along the Arctic coast with possibly some upper 20s over the North Slope, but generally staying in the 30s and above freezing up here with mid 40s up over the northwest valleys, and 30s to mid 40s over the central interior, and lower to mid 40s here over south central Alaska, mid to upper 40s for the southeast coast. Highs tomorrow in the 50s and 60s to near 70 there across the Panhandle, and about the same here, 60s to near 70 over the inland areas of southern Alaska, a little cooler in the 50s there along the coast, but the interior again, 70s to near 80, especially over in the eastern portion here, 40-mile country, Eagle, maybe Tok. Northway forecast 73. Arctic coast up near 40, in some cases maybe the lower 50s over the North Slope there, with actually looks like 60s along the inland areas of the North Slope, with 40s and 50s here in the west under the clouds and rain, 40s to mid 50s for Bristol Bay, and in the 40s for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Flying weather shows good VFR from the eastern Arctic coast southward across the North Slope here, and even in the west central interior. VFR out across the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. We've got some marginal VFR here over the Kilbruck and the Kilbrook Mountains as well as the Kuskokwim Mountains, and some IFR southwest of Kodiak Island. Marginal VFR extending across the island up into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, and just catching, looks like Seldovia there, with marginal VFR and that low clouds persisting here eastern Gulf of Alaska, but off the coast of the Panhandle, maybe mostly off the coast and the North Gulf Coast as well. Otherwise, a big area of IFR here from the northeast Bering Sea northward through the strait there up across the Chukchi Sea, and that should stay off the western and central Arctic coast. Looking at the passes, Anatuvik looks occasionally VFR tomorrow. Adigan should be VFR. And, excuse me, Lake Clark, VFR could become marginal in the afternoon, or actually starting out VFR could become marginal anytime during the day tomorrow. Otherwise, Merrill should stay VFR. Rainy far enough north to stay VFR, and windy definitely far enough north to be VFR. Isabel, Eastern Alaska Range passes both open. And for Mentasta, VFR, Tanita, VFR, and Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, both VFR for another couple of days. And for the freezing levels here, 10,000 feet over the eastern panhandle of northwest Canada, with 6 to 8,000 feet over the central and eastern interior. So another day, much like tomorrow, much like today there, temperature-wise. Another day, temperature-wise out here in the west as well, with freezing levels running 2 to 4,000 feet out along the coast, up to 6,000 feet over the west central interior. Cooler air out here over the Bering Sea down to about 2,000 feet. Taking a look at the icing chart, got a band here of light to isolated moderate rime or mixed icing here up across the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, northward through the interior along that frontal boundary all the way up into the northwest valleys there, Kotzebue Sound, and then some isolated mixed icing out here to the west in the more showery conditions, but icing free over the central interior, icing free over the panhandle, and icing free over much of the Aleutians until Monday when this system pulls up to the northeast. And then for the looking at the winds aloft chart, tremendous ridge of high pressure here, centered just east of the border there over the Northwest Territories of Canada. That directing all the storminess south to north here and keeping it in the west. Those fronts come across and then they hit this south to north flow and mostly go north and then end up just dissipating over the southwest interior or under the ridge like the last one did. And then the jet stream here mostly south of the Aleutians. At 9,000 feet, southerly winds here over the western interior, 25 to 30 knots, so pretty brisk, but lighter and more variable over the east side, 5 to 10 knots, light variable winds here along the panhandle at about 5 knots, northwesterlies at 15. At 9,000 feet, those become about 20 knots, both at 3,000 feet on down to the surface from the northwest, out along and off the coast. Otherwise, the inland areas there, light and variable, 0 to 5 knots. That same pattern extends up over the southeast interior, up into the Tanana Valley areas, actually up into the Yukon. Then you pick it up about 10 knots from the southwest, but still at 3,000 feet, much like at 9, had this bend, broad area of southerly winds, 20 to 30 knots, as high as 40 knots there blowing across the Monarch and 35 knots into the Bering Strait. Otherwise, taking a turn more southwesterly at 15 up along the Arctic coast, and more winds a little more westerly out here over the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians at about 10 to 20 knots, up to 25 knots over the Pribilof Islands. And turbulence-wise, with those that broad area of southerly winds, we'll see some occasional widespread moderate chop here in the turquoise-shaded areas from Nunivak Island, Kuskokwim Bay, northward there, across the Yukon Delta and the western Seward Peninsula up to about Point Hope, maybe Cape Lisburne, and then over the Kilbuck Mountains and also the southern Alaska Peninsula, southern Alaska Range down to the Aleutian Range, and over the western Alaska Peninsula. Maybe a little bit of light to isolated moderate chop for smaller aircraft here along the coast of the Panhandle, but nothing too serious at all. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Everybody has observed flooding at some time, either firsthand or in the media. More people lose their lives in floods than in any other weather-related event. Related flood damages exceed $3 billion each year. The Great Flood of 1993 caused over $15 billion in damages across the upper Midwest. Similar floods from excessive rainfall associated with tropical storms or hurricanes attract much media attention and contain few surprises. These floods occur over days and weeks, while short-duration, intense rainfall events produce flash floods. Flash floods can roll boulders the size of cars, tear out trees, destroy buildings and bridges, and pose a significant threat to human lives. Flash floods can occur in what is normally a dry creek bed. A hidden danger awaits motorists where a road without a bridge dips across a creek bed. This is called a low-water crossing. Low-water crossings represent a hidden danger because flooding occurs in an area that people normally and frequently pass through. Few people appreciate the power of running water. Even fewer realize how fast water can rise in a small stream and flood a highway, creating a dangerous situation. A similar dangerous situation occurs for motorists who drive through low drainage areas flooded by standing water. Floods and flash floods are costly to human life and property. Nearly half of the flood-related deaths that occur each year are vehicle-related, and damages to vehicles can easily exceed $1 million. Although many of the highway dips that become low-water crossings are identified as potential flood areas, people do not understand the hidden dangers, and lives are needlessly lost. Dr. Susan Zevin, Deputy Assistant Administrator for Operations at the National Weather Service, will discuss why low-water crossings can be so dangerous to motorists.
Well, water weighs 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. What does that mean? That's the equivalent of 2 cinder blocks that can hit you in your knees going at 10 miles an hour. When a vehicle stalls in the water's momentum is transferred to the car. So for each foot that the water rises, 500 pounds of force on the side are applied to the car. Buoyancy is the biggest factor. For each foot of water that the water rises, it displaces 1,500 pounds that your car weighs, so that your car will weigh 1,500 pounds less than it did before. You can lose control of your car in 2 feet of water. And in smaller cars, you can lose control of the car in 6 inches of water.
Why do so many people needlessly lose their lives in flooding at road dips and low-water crossings? People have extreme confidence in the size and weight of their vehicle. Many people interviewed, such as Charles Lovett, expressed surprise at the force of the water.
I tried to charge through the water, and I got about right here when the truck just stopped dead, and I panicked a little bit here, and it started to move a couple of inches, couple of feet. As we moved down into the stream here, and we started to get carried away, it wasn't a floating sensation, it was as if we were completely out of control.
The difference in many cases is inches. Those people who have at various times repeatedly driven through a flooded low-water crossing do not recognize the danger of a small increase in the water level. The second misconception is the past history involved in driving through a low-water crossing.
I thought it wasn't deep, but I guess it got deep.
Sign said don't go through here when it's flooded.
Oh, I know, but I went through here before, and it was not even deep at all.
The third misconception is the idea that driving fast through a low-water crossing will enable the driver to arrive safely on the other side. It's simply not true. The faster a driver attempts to cross a road covered with water, the less contact he has with the road. Once the vehicle begins to hydroplane, it begins to float, and control of the vehicle is lost. Making the situation worse, more than half of all low-water crossing vehicular-related deaths take place at night when visibility is limited. Under these conditions, the vulnerability of the driver and passengers to the hidden danger is greatly magnified. The existence of low-water crossings is very prevalent throughout the United States, especially in the Southwest, where many low-water crossings exist. There are things you can do to reduce the risk of becoming a low-water crossing fatality.
Heed all flood and flash flood warnings issued by the National Weather Service. Do not drive around barricades at low-water crossings. Be especially vigilant at night or when traveling on unfamiliar roads. Do not cross flowing water. Observe rising water indicators at low water crossings. Remember, as little as 6 inches of water may cause you to lose control of your car. Be aware that roadbeds may be washed away under the floodwaters. If you choose to abandon your vehicle, respect the force of the water. Remember, just 6 inches of fast-moving water will knock you off your feet.
Floods and flash floods will continue to occur. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and its National Weather Service, has the mission to provide river and flood forecasts and warnings to the nation. But the warnings are only effective if the people know and understand the dangers of floods. Rising waters over roadways pose a threat to life, save lives and property. Don't take chances with hidden dangers at low water crossings.
Welcome back. We'll look for northwest winds, 20 knots all along the outer coastline there. Northwest over the central and southern inside waters as well, about 15 knots. And then southerly in the afternoon for Lynn Canal, northern Lynn Canal at about 15. Seas out here running 7 to 8 feet and then about 3 feet over the inside zones. And then for Monday, winds become light and variable here through the central areas. No change down to the south, no change up to the north, and really no change out here along the coast except becoming lighter and more westerly there along the extreme north coast. Seas running 6 to 7 feet, coming down a little bit from what they'll be tomorrow. And for the North Gulf Coast, west winds at 20 knots with 6-foot seas, southwest 15 for the western Gulf Coast, and that same pattern right up across Prince William Sound as well. Southwest 15 here, northern Cook Inlet, southern Cook Inlet, southerlies at about 15, southeast 20 knots with 7-foot seas for the Barren Islands, and for Kamishak Bay, southeast 20 knots with 6-foot seas. Kodiak Island looking southerly at about 20 knots with 7-foot seas there, and southeast at 15 for Shelikof Strait. And the outlook for Monday is a little bit lighter in some areas and no change in others. Southwest 15 for the western Gulf Coast, westerlies at about 20 for the central coast. Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, southwest breeze, especially in the afternoon up to 15, maybe 20 knots. Southerlies at 15 for the inlet, and southeasterlies here, Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay on the light side, and light southerlies there on the east side of Kodiak Island. No change for Shelikof Strait from what they'll see Sunday. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, southerly winds here 20 to 25 knots, of small craft advisories here on the Bering Sea side with 6-foot seas. Small craft advisories out also for Bristol Bay, southeast winds 25 knots with 6-foot seas, southeast 25 with 10-foot seas there southwest of Kodiak Island. And then for Tuesday, still have a small craft advisory, or for Monday, small craft advisories here for the Alaska Peninsula, south to southeast winds 25 knots, seas running 6 to 9 feet, southeast 15 for Bristol Bay, and south 20 southwest of Kodiak. Out in the Aleutians, we got easterlies here in the western zone, but only 15 knots from the southwest here west of Adak and Atka. Westerlies there across the central Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots, and then south to southwest, 15 to 25 knots for the Fox Islands. And for Monday, northerly winds, 30 knots, the next system coming up, something like this. So north to northeast winds, 30 knots to the west of that low center, and out ahead of the front, looks like southeast to southeast winds at 30 knots there for the central and west or eastern Aleutians, 25 knots for the Fox Islands from the south-southeast. Seas running 7 to 9 feet there, and then 8 to 11 feet everywhere else. For the southwest coast, southerlies 20 to 25 knots, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island with 3 to 5 foot seas. Lighter southwest winds here for the northern Bering Sea down across the Pribilofs. And then for Monday, those winds go around the southeast, come back up to small craft advisories there. Also small craft advisories here for the southwest coast, south to southeast, 25 knots. Southeast 20 for the northern Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island. Seas in the ice-free waters here running about 3 to 4 feet. Up along the Arctic coast there on the central coast, southerlies at 10 knots. Same thing for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. More southeasterly at about 15 there toward Demarcation Point and Kaktovik. Southeast 15 on the west side and southeast 20 knots here from Wales to Cape Thompson. And then for Monday, southeast winds 20 knots there for the southeast Chukchi Sea, Wales to Cape Thompson, that zone. Southeast 15 knots here for the central and west side, and then easterly winds at about 20 knots along the eastern Beaufort Sea. And then for tonight, fair skies, mild conditions, breezy conditions, but breezy this evening, and that'll be diminishing toward midnight and after. Risk of a few showers here over the eastern part of the southern southeast coastal areas. Otherwise, no change there. Low clouds along the coastline, back around along the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula. This front pushing rain inland over toward Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, up across the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim River valleys into the northwest interior. More rain for the Seward Peninsula. Showers following in behind here with that big trough out over the Bering Sea. Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians, back out toward Adak. Looks pretty showery, a little breezy tonight. And then tomorrow, this rain band right along the southwest coast again. So Alaska Peninsula, more rain over the eastern portions, not so much in the west. More showery there. Showers up across Nunivak Island. Rain up across the Seward Peninsula. Periods of nothing too terrible.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.